So, my talk today, I gave several options. You all rejected the lizard idea, which is fine. No one likes lizards. I wore my lizard shirt. I'm naturally a herpetologist. I'm a paleoherpetologist by training. So that includes all reptiles except birds. I'll explain that here in a second. So I can answer a lot of questions, but today I'm going to stay in the realm of snakes and alligators, which is a long-standing history in Florida. As long as Florida has existed, we've had alligators and snakes, but more on that here in a second. Before I get any further though, I'd like to kind of, especially in my first talk to a group, I want to start really, really broad. So step one, what is a reptile, right? I'm going to be talking about reptiles today. People like to generalize taxonomic groups. They like to generalize groups based on their morphology. We like to say that snakes are reptiles that look like lizards but don't have limbs, or that birds are bipedal things with wings and fly. Those are characteristics. They can be true. They don't have to be true. You don't have to have any certain morphologies to belong to a certain group. The only thing that matters, the only thing that makes you anything is your relationship, where you are within the relationship of the tree of life. So a reptile, as you see in this diagram here, are crocs, birds, lizards and snakes, which are actually the same clade, tuataras, which are a single species today, and turtles. That's what a reptile is. Everything that's within reptilia fits within that tree of life. So you are a reptile if you're closer to a bird or a croc than you are to a mammal, for instance. And reptiles are sister to mammals. That collectively forms its own clade. So if you look within reptiles, though, something that people like to point out, there's no dinosaurs on this clade, right? Where are the dinosaurs? Dinosaurs are being demarcated by the phrase birds here. Birds are dinosaurs. It's not that they're closely related to, it's not that they're ancestors of. Birds are dinosaurs. The same way that you say a turtle is a reptile or we are mammals, birds are dinosaurs. It's the exact same clade. If we look here at the tree of life, people have debates about how dinosaurs are related, but this is the group that I tend to go with. We see that birds are theropodian, saurischian dinosaurs, closest in relationship to things like T-Rex than they are stegosaurs, for instance. But that's where they fit within here. That is all a reptile. If you're not one of those groups, you're not a reptile. The other thing you'll note is that if you're not in this bird clade, if you're not in this dinosaur clade, you're not a dinosaur, right? People always ask me what a dinosaur is. A dinosaur is closer to birds than they are to crocs. That's the definition. A crocodile may look like a dinosaur. It's actually the closest related thing to dinosaurs, but crocodiles are not dinosaurs. And therefore, neither are lizards and snakes, or turtles, or tuatara. I even have some people think that frogs are dinosaurs. No, they're amphibians, right? So now that we're in the basis, so again, here's where we're focused on reptiles, birds, or dinosaurs. I forget my animations sometimes. There they are again, but they're dinosaurs. So key anatomy. Now that we've talked about the major groups that we're going to be looking at, what are things that you look for in the fossil record? Things that are reptiles do tend to have the same morphology, same anatomy as other reptilians, which means for a fossil hunter, when you're looking for reptilian fossils, there are certain things you consistently can look for. One of the most common things that we find in the fossil record are vertebrae, right? Things, elements of the backbone. You can actually very consistently, predictably tell what group a vertebra belongs to based on the shape of the centrum. The centrum is the bottom of the vertebra. The centrum has two parts, an anterior part and a posterior part. If the anterior part of the centrum is concave and the back part is convex, we call that procoelus. Coelus is Latin for concave. Pro means forward. Okay. All of these variations, amphicoelus, both, amphi means both concave. We have two different versions of theirs, amphipladian, all of these different fancy words, they're all referring to shape. It's a fancy way for academics to feel smart, but in reality we're just explaining very simple things. Heterocoelus, right? Heterocoelus, two different styles, both concave. We actually have two different styles, that's only in birds. It sounds fancy, it's not nearly as difficult as it sounds. Amphipladian, I'm going to highlight a few key ones. All mammals are amphipladian. We are amphipladian. If you look at our centra, those whale vertebrae, I can always tell you it's a mammal. Both sides will be flat. If you look at the centrum and they're both flat, you're looking at a mammal. If you look at both sides and they're concave, and you have a notochord, which is a hole that pierces through the center. If both sides are concave and you have a pierced hole through the center, you're a fish. Almost every single time. Fish do weird things, but 98% of the time. Amphicoelus, if you're conditioned where you don't have a pierced vertebrae, you're a frog, or a Sicilian, or an amphibian of some kind. All amphibians have amphicoelus vertebrae. In the case of what we're going to be talking about today, procoelus is what you're looking for. If you find a vertebra where one side is concave, one side is convex, you're looking at a reptile. So all snakes, all lizards, all crocodiles are procoelus. And then tooth support, the other thing that we often look for, things that bear teeth. Cranial elements are pretty rare. You don't often find something like this. The brain case is very soft. We find a lot of vertebrae, and we find a lot of elements that contain teeth. If you want to know what kind of animal you have, if it's thecodont, at the very top, we are thecodont. That means your tooth sits in a socket. That means your tooth is sitting in bone. That is classically considered a mammal character, but today we're going to talk about alligators. I'll show you that alligators are in fact thecodont. The other form is acrodont. Nothing is acrodont in the Western Hemisphere. There's not a single acrodont animal. It's weird. Chameleons are acrodont, but nothing in the Western Hemisphere, so don't worry about that one. Pleurodont is the other one you have to worry about. Pleurodont means the tooth is on the side. Pleuro means side, dont means tooth. Again, academics like to feel fancy, so we make it Latin, but all we're saying is the tooth is on the side of the jaw. So if you look at your jaw and the tooth sits on the side of the jaw, it's pleurodont, and that is every reptilian condition except alligators and crocodiles. No birds. I call myself a herpetologist. Why do I say that? Herpetology is the study of things that crawl. In Latin, again, very fancy, herp means crawl, ology, study of. So anything that crawls technically falls in the realm of what I study. It's a very condescending term, right? It's the idea that it's the lower life forms. So herpetology is the study of all reptiles and amphibians except birds. Why? Because birds don't crawl. So whenever time people give lectures, they like to give lectures on birds and mammals, and then after that they give one on herpetology because birds are too fancy, they're too good. This refers back to an old religious concept called scalendatore, which believed that mammals and birds were closer to God, everything else was beneath them. They were the lower life forms. Even some of the most famous herpetologists, such as Gilmore, would even use the term lower life forms when referring to the things he himself was studying. A little condescending, it's fine, I accept it, I'm a herpetologist. But anyone who studies crocs or alligators is a paleoherpetologist. We study the ancient crawling things. So today, to begin with, we're going to talk with squamates. I told you that there are snakes. My title seems to suggest that snakes are from the south. I'll explain that in a second, but first, again, let's put it in context. Squamata, this is a word that, again, paleontologists love to use. Squamates. Squamates are, on this tree, lizards and snakes. It's the same thing. You can't call a snake not a lizard. You can't call a lizard not a snake. They're actually nested together. There's not really a defining way to separate. All snakes are technically close as they are to themselves and any other lizard, but they're nested within lizards. It would like, if a snake weren't a lizard, then a bird's not a dinosaur. It's the same kind of logic. So lizards and snakes, pretty inseparable, so I usually talk about them together. If we look at the tree of squamates, this is all squamates. Squamates are the largest group of vertebrates on the planet. Far more than mammals and nearly more than birds. Birds cheat because they like to fly into different islands. So other than birds, this is the most diverse group of vertebrates on the planet. And if we look at all snakes are right here. Some of the classic questions are things like mosasaurs. You know, mosasaurs are squamates. That's the last real big standard question where they fit. They might be snakes, they might be varanids, we still don't know. Otherwise, we have a very good idea of where all squamates fit within this tree. Squamate key anatomy, if you find a squamate, again, they're always going to be procoelous vertebrae. They're always going to be pleurodont teeth, always. This includes snakes. At the very top, that's a snake. If you ever find a jaw and you see the teeth, A, they're going to be small, and B, the teeth will always be on the side. That gives you a sense of what you're looking at. And if you have a snake, the one thing all snakes will always have, look at this lizard vertebrae, we see nothing on top of the neural spine. At the front of the neural spine, it's a nice, simple complex. In snakes, they have an additional structure called a zygosphene. Every single snake has a zygosphene. Every single snake. If you find a vertebrate that's procoelous and has a complex structure in front of the neural spine, it's a snake. That's how we identify what we have. Now, snakes in Newton, Florida, that have been here, that have always been here, that are here today, things like these hog-nosed snakes, or the viperids, right, this beautiful cottonmouth. We have the colubrids, including this gorgeous venomous coral snake, and nature scenes like garter snakes. But the snake that I want to talk to you today, the one that came from the south, the one that most people don't think of, was described in 1952, and it was from these vertebrae. It's from a site called Tom's Farm. Who here has ever heard of Tom's Farm? Tom's Farm is the state's oldest site. It is the largest site in our collection. It's been collected for over 100 years. And one of the first discoveries was this massive, it's hard to tell on scale, but these are massive snake vertebrae belonging to a bowing of some kind. A boa was the initial idea. So Tom's Farm, if you don't know, is about 18 million years old. It's one of our oldest sites in the state's history. Initially, it was collected, it was actually owned for a long time by other universities, including Harvard. Eventually, we would be given the site. The Florida Museum actually owns Tom's Farm to this day. It's been worked by several famous people. Here's a long list of people. But the fossil snakes that were found there were identified as bowings. If they were bowings, as people thought, they would be the oldest occurrence of bowings in North America. Ooh. This was a big deal at the time, at least it kind of initially seemed. Here's Tom's Farm. This is what it looked like 18 million years ago, 18 million years. Sea level's a lot higher, Florida's a lot smaller. But I say boeings, not boa. This is something we have to clarify here. Boeing is a family, it's a group of snakes. This is the tree that is boeings. In green is highlighted what are called Chilobothrus. Chilobothrus are thin, small, bat-eating snakes that are found only in the Caribbean. All right, so that's one group of boeings. The other is boa, the classic boa, the thing that we all think of. Boa is actually a single species. It's a genus, but it only contains one species today at least, and that's boa constrictor. Obviously, boa constrictor natively only lives in South America, but we have introduced versions of boa constrictor in southern Florida today. It's a real problem. Eunectes, you may know that more as the anaconda, the heaviest snake in the world. Corallus, these beautiful tree boas, and lastly Epicrates, these gorgeous rainbow boas. These are the boeings. So in 1952, Vanzolini recognized the vertebrae from Thomas Farm as being boeings, somewhere in this tree of life. He didn't know where. And he gave it a made-up name. There's also a boa from the Caribbean today. People ask me this at some point usually. The boas from the Caribbean are a very recent thing. This is not a long-standing existence. Boas are South American. So we start with Vanzolini in 1952, and he names the vertebrae two species. He calls it Neurodromicus danielsoni and barbari. Two species, two different vertebrae. He doesn't even attempt to place it in the tree of life. He has no idea where they are. He just says they're boeings. They're giant snakes. 1963, a name that you might recognize, Walter Offenberg, comes along and sees these vertebrae, finds some more in fact, and he gives it a new name. He says it's not two species, it's one, and the species is Pseudo-Epicrates. Epicrates, if you remember back, are the tree boas. He thought maybe it's a tree boa. All right, fine. Except he puts the word pseudo, and when paleontologists put pseudo, it means they don't really know what they're talking about. It means they're trying. It means it looks like one. You'll see things like epi or pseudo or para. Anytime you see that, it means they don't know what they're talking about. So in this case, he says it kind of looks like Epicrates, but he has no idea what he's talking about. Kluge in 1988 does something more. He goes back to two species. He says, no, it is two species, one of which is Pseudo-Epicrates, so I also don't know what I'm talking about, but also boa constrictor. He adds one more. He says, I think some of the vertebrae actually are boa constrictor. He doesn't even just say boa, he says constrictor. He says the species alive today was alive in Thomas Farm 19 million years ago, unchanged. But there are two species. Jason Head and Albino in 2008, 2012, they come back to these same vertebrae, and they say, no. Pseudo-Epicrates is crazy. It was always crazy. It is crazy. In fact, it's one species, and they're all boa. In fact, boa constrictor. Jason Head says boa constrictor. The man who's the king of snakes today says it's the same species. He's insane. In 2018, though, somebody comes back along, looks at the same vertebrae and says, no, you're all wrong, it's Chilobothrus. If you remember Chilobothrus, these are the Caribbean snakes. These are those thin little bat-eating snakes from the Caribbean. He says, no, they are boeings, but Chilobothrus. And they're all looking at these vertebrae. This is all they have. We talked about vertebrae, some of the most common things found. Lots of vertebrae found. That was all that we had for a long, long time. And the thing that they're all looking at is this labeled ML, which stands for medial lobe or medium lobe. I call it Jason's knob because our preparator, Jason Bork, loves to talk about it. So if you look at Jason's knob and some of the specimens like A, C, D, F, G, those are all things from Thomas Farm. B and E, that's boa constrictor. In this paper, initially when they said Chilobothrus, they were saying the medial lobe in those from Thomas Farm is too well developed. That little knob is too far protruding, whereas in boa constrictor, it's much more invaginated. It goes in instead of out. So therefore, it must be Chilobothrus because Chilobothrus is the only thing that has this. Ultimately, though, who cares? Right? It's a lot of back and forth, a lot of papers, a lot of names. 7 different species names have been derived from these single vertebrae. That's ridiculous. Over 60 years of debate about this. Who cares? And actually, it does kind of matter. So, if the boa vertebrae from Thomas Farm are in fact the genus boa, that is the first thing from South America to reach North America ever. It ends a great period of what's called the Great Isolation Period, which is actually a what's our library named after? Simpson, George Gaylord Simpson, the Splendid Isolation Theory, which is that now North America and South America were separated for a long time. They were isolated until what's called the Gavi. I'll get into this in a second. You may have heard the Great American Biography Interchange. If this truly is boa, this ends the Gavi 9 million years earlier than anything else. The first thing to reach North America from South America. That's important. So if it's boa, if it's Chilobothrus, and Chilobothrus is from the Caribbean, like I said. If it's from Chilobothrus, it's only the second animal to ever get from the Caribbean to Florida, ever. The first occurrence was a frog, described by one of my collaborators, Maria Camila Vallejo, last year. So up until last year, nothing had ever reached Florida from the Caribbean. So either way, it's a biogeographically interesting story. But we have to decide which one it is. So either coming from South America or coming from the Caribbean. So, the task that we took on at Florida Museum was to ask this question: what genus of Boeing is present at Thomas Farm 18 million years ago? And what does this taxonomic assignment tell us about the origins and paleobiogeographic history? Biogeographic history. Paleo just means ancient, so the ancient geographic history, again, very fancy. Well, thankfully, renewed digging efforts that started in 2012 as part of the CSBR grant, Collection Support Grant, actually took us back out to digging at Thomas Farm. It's not something we do a lot, certainly not recently. And in this project, we were actually specifically looking for hummingbirds. So we were looking for tiny fossils, so there's a real push of looking for small fossils, a lot of screen washing efforts. We never found the hummingbird, still haven't, but we did find the first ever cranial element from these bones. We found the first ever jaw. A whole new element, actually a more important element, a more significant element to the taxonomy. We found this jaw. So I then further asked the question, can this generally further corroborate? Will it agree with either Kilobothris or boa assignment? At the University of Florida, we like to CT scan every fossil. We get a fossil, we immediately CT scan it. Sometimes I don't know why. But in this case, the reason we CT scan is because we wanted to compare it with a bunch of other living animals. We took every Boeing that exists, we CT scanned to look at their jaws, and we made a massive comparison of jaws and vertebrae, in fact. We actually took even more vertebrae. We created the largest comparative data set of all Boeing anatomy. And we compared them. So we scanned Corallus, Kilobothris, boa, Eunectes, and several Thomas Farm specimens. This is what our CT scanner looks like, by the way. The first thing that we noticed is that a little bit of that, what that paper had said before, which is that Thomas Farm had a really pronounced medial lobe, or Jason's knob. These are Thomas Farm vertebrae. We found that to be a little bit facetious. We found, in fact, that only maybe 10% of all the vertebrae there actually had any sort of prominent knob. The vast majority of them were relatively flat. What that paper didn't show in their figure, and actually I'll pop it up here, you'll notice they never put a Kilobothris on the image. Because when you put Kilobothris, you realize these don't look anything like Kilobothris. This is Kilobothris. That's ridiculous. I mean, that's enormous. That's nothing like what we're finding in Thomas Farm. So the first thing that our data set showed us is some of the vertebral characters that we're used to assigning Kilobothris are ridiculous anyways. And again, there's quite a bit of variation. B and E are both from boa constrictor. We see how variable that region is. So it's already an area that's not super informative. So we kind of tackled that question. But now let's look at the jaws. Let's compare Thomas Farm on the top left, boa constrictor, Kilobothris, and Corallus. The first thing we noticed is the case that both boa constrictor and Thomas Farm are much more linear. They're much more columnar. They're much more rigid jaws. Very straight line system. These are much more angled, much more bow-like. I'll explain why that is in a second. We also noticed that the bone sitting above and below the post-dennary insertion, there's another bone called the post-dennary. It's a single element. It inserts into the dennary. The elements below, above, and below that were much thicker. There was a much more asymmetry. The lower was much thicker than the top in Kilobothris and Corallus. Whereas in Thomas Farm and boa, that thickness is pretty much the same exact thickness. What this does is means the insertion angle, the angle at which the post-dennary inserts at, here ends up being much more asymmetric, whereas in Thomas Farm, it's a very columnar linear insertion. If you look at the other side, we'll also note that this post-dennary flange, this flange that sits underneath the dennary that connects with the post-dennary bone, is much longer in Thomas Farm and boas, very short in Kilobothris and Corallus. It's hard to tell on this one. It's broken. It's broken. It would be much longer. It did break. It's not perfect. So we're doing our best. The other thing you'll notice is the teeth are much more recurved. We have big, Nike swoosh-shaped teeth, whereas in these are much upright teeth. All of this collectively, what does this refer to? It means that the Thomas Farm animal, as well as boa constrictors, hence the name, are probably kind of animals that are gripping and grasping large prey. They need a stiff, rigid jaw. They can't have a jaw that moves very much. So if we go back to this, a nice columnar insertion with a posterior bone allows for a very straight line jaw, one that doesn't flex very much. Coming at an angle like we see on Kilobothris and Corallus, very kinetic, a lot of motion. So again, the Thomas Farm and boa is a big constricting animal. Its teeth are recurved, it wants to hold the prey. It doesn't care about catching the prey, but it needs to hold the prey. Whereas in things like Kilobothris and Corallus, these are thin, small, spindly things. These things sit above cave entrances and catch bats as they leave. It's very unfair. They sit and dangle over a cave in the evening. As the bats come out, they just grab them, right? They need a very kinetic jaw because they're catching, they're having a lot of elastic response. The prey is small, it's weak, right? Bats and birds are not very strong things. And they need their teeth to stick out more. They need their teeth to be more procumbent. So they can't be super recurved. They need to stick out and grab the prey. So that tells us that this thing doesn't just have vertebrae that look a little bit more like boa. The jaw and lifestyle is also a lot more like boa. That is the data that we're using. That is our current conclusion, therefore, that this thing is in fact boa. It's acting like boa. It looks like boa. It's eating like boa. So we go back to, the paper that we're in the midst of writing is reassigning these specimens, all the fossils from Thomas Farm, back to BOA. This does not support the Caribbean origin, it does support the South American origin. Now I talked about this being the first occurrence in North America. Technically, and I had to put this in because my advisor is John Block, and he wrote this very important paper, which is called Paleocene-Eocene, which is a monkey that very successfully went from here to here. Does anyone here in this room think Panama is North America? Who here would say Panama is North America? I certainly don't. Nobody else does, except this paper. So apparently getting to Panama, means you got to North America, and it technically did so 21 million years ago. But I don't count that. Instead, what I like to say is that this snake is the first thing to reach North America from South America by 9 million years. 9 million years older than anything else to reach North America. The only other thing to have reached North America are Thinopodastes and Paleoecology, these giant brown sloths. They reached McGehee and Mixon's bone bed from South America 9 million years ago. The Thomas Farm snake is 18 to 19 million years old. 8 to 9 million years earlier than any mammal. Snakes, whatever boundaries were existing for these mammals, snakes got past it. The main pulses of the gaby, the Great American Biotic Interchange, in fact, don't even happen until 4.5. So in terms of the main body of the gaby, we're getting into North America about 14 million years earlier, at least snakes are. Snakes are doing something that no mammal can. Anytime mammals do something great, I get really excited. We're in the midst of writing a paper that's redefining the gaby. We're going to make the gaby beginning with reptiles instead of mammals. It's very exciting. So anyway, that was our main conclusion from the snake thing. I'm going to now palate cleanse. Let's get away. Squamates. Not a lot of people do squamates. Let's get to the crocodiles. Right? We have a crocodile here. You find crocodile fossils. Very few people find snake fossils. Has anyone here ever found a snake fossil? Okay. All right. Good. That makes me happy. They're very rare. They're very small. So let's go to the groups that most people do find. Crocodilians. Let's do the same thing. We're going to set the base. So where are crocodilians? Like I said, crocodilians are sister to birds. That means they're sister to dinosaurs. Collectively, the birds and dinosaurs make a clade you may have heard of called archosaurs. Archosaurs or Archosauria is crocs and dinosaurs. So within crocodilians, modern orders of crocodilians. Crocodilians today are only 26 species. That's it. In the entire world, there's only 26. In the past, there were hundreds. The diversity is way down from what it used to be. 26 species worldwide. These include the alligators that we think of. You might not know there's actually another species of alligator. Today it only lives in China. Any guess what sinensis means in Latin? It means Chinese. Chinese alligator. Mississippi alligator. Very complex people. Alligators are sister to caimans, right? This is the caiman group. All of this is then sister to the classic crocodilians. Alligators are crocodilia, but crocodilians, things like gavials, mesostops, and the classic crocodiles. That is the entire diversity of crocodilians. So key anatomy, again, if you ever find a crocodilian element, you'll know because one, it's huge, and two, again, it's always procoelous. Front side concave, back side convex. You find one of these vertebrae, it's a crocodilian. Their teeth, as I mentioned at the beginning, are thecodont. The only animals in the world that have thecodont dentition are archosaurs, crocs and dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are also thecodont, and mammals. So this wonderful jaw I just showed you, that tooth is sitting in a socket. That socket is a thecodont condition. Crocodiles also have a thecodont. So you find a jaw, big pointy teeth like this, but they're sitting in the jaw itself. That's a crocodile, crocodilian. Some oddballs to consider though, I will say there is one vertebra, one single vertebra. Rachel took this picture, so I have to acknowledge her. They have one vertebra that is both sides convex. Very, very rare. It's the only animal that actually has this condition other than turtles. Both sides convex. The reason it's convex is because it's the first vertebra in the tail. The very first vertebra of all crocodilians is both side convex. It gives it more rotation, right? Tail motility is very important for alligators and crocodiles. It's one of their modes of swimming. So that first vertebra is condyle on both sides, gives it a little bit more range of motion. They only have one. Only one crocodilian vertebrae will have this condition. They also are known for their osteoderms, right? Very, very dense bone that covers the back of all crocodilians. Yep. You can actually tell the difference. In Florida, at least, the alligator and the alligator osteoderms have a nice keel, nice big keel right down the center. If you find a crocodile osteoderm, it's nice and flat, no keel. And then, of course, the teeth. We find lots of teeth. Alligator teeth are usually more robust, bigger. They eat turtles, they eat fish, they eat hard things. The crocodile teeth we find almost always are thin, spindly. The piscivoids usually do eat fish. So what alligators, what crocodiles do we find in Florida? Well, the first alligator is from Thomas Farm in that very famous locality. This is a very famous skull. Actually, this is one of the first recognized alligator fossils of an extinct species. This was described a long time ago, 1942, by White, and it's called Alligator olsoni. So again, Thomas Farm, 19 to 60 million years old. This is one of the oldest fossil alligators that's been on record. It's the first definitive of the genus Alligator. The second described alligator specimen ever from Florida is from a site called Racetrack. Racetrack is no longer something we can access. It was actually another construction of a racetrack itself. It produced one beautiful skull. This skull was actually the first non-Mississippiensis or Olsoni skull ever reported from Florida until Edward Whiting in 2016. He came along and said, no, it's actually just Mississippiensis. So in our database, all of the racetrack specimens are actually Mississippiensis, the modern species. And the third description of an alligator fossil is Alligator halensis. This was recently by Jeremy Stout in 2021 from the Hale 7G, 7C site. He named it something new. He says this is the 5th ever species of alligator. He calls it Alligator halensis. And that's it. In terms of anything else, we do have one crocodile, Thecochamsa americana. Gaviella sucus has several different names. The name that we use right now is Thecochamsa. It ranges from 13 to 6 million years old. People ask me, why did it go extinct? No idea. Absolutely no idea, but it does. We know all of a sudden we have no more occurrences of these things, even though they used to be very common at about 6 million years. And that's the record. That's the current published record of crocodilians in Florida, a state that is known for its gators, has 4 papers. If we look at that history, so this is Florida in the Oligocene, Florida in the Miocene. Thecochamsa goes out in this period. This is when they disappear. Pliocene, Pleistocene. We have sites with crocodilians, almost all of them unreported, undescribed, starting as soon as Florida exists, even when it's still probably an island. We have Brooksville alligator fossils. No one's described them or looked at them, but we've had Florida alligators as long as Florida's existed. Florida crocodiles, up until 6 million years they've been here. But where do they come from? And this is where my title, I have to come back to my title, Alligators from the North. Strangerochamsa and Albertochamsa are the alligator origins. This is the first record of an alligator. Does anyone here want to guess where these two specimens are found from the same locality? Where are they from? Where do alligators start? I'd love to, if anyone knows this, that would make me so happy. I'll give you a hint. Canada. Alberta. Both of these specimens, Strangerochamsa and Albertochamsa, are from Canada. The dawn of alligators, the dawn of alligators is in Canada. But when is important. This made sense to me when I made it. It doesn't make sense to anyone else, so let me walk you through it. It's color-coded by time. It's Roy G. Biv, bright colors of the rainbow. Reds being the oldest in time, purple being the youngest. Albertochamsa, Strangerochamsa, you see pointed in southern Alberta, southernmost Canada. But from the Cretaceous, the dawn of alligators actually is in the Mesozoic. It's in the age of the dinosaurs. They start in the Cretaceous, and they start north. At this time, at the end Cretaceous Paleocene, this is kind of what the continent looked like. We had a big, massive Central American seaway that split the continent in two. And because of this, alligators, they don't do well in salt water, right? Unlike crocodiles, they don't have a salt gland, so they can't deal with salt water. So for a long time, they stay west. So you'll see the Eocene, the Paleocene, Cretaceous are almost always west of that exchange. The seaway starts to dry up in the mid to late Paleocene, gives rise to a cannibal seaway, and you'll start to see after that, they start moving east, Oligocene, Miocene, Pleistocene. As soon as Florida comes into existence, gators get here, right? They go north, head southeast as fast as they can. And you see how many species there are, an amazing diversity of these things. These are stem alligators. There's even a European record. It may be that alligators made it to Europe for a very small period of time. They don't last long, but Germany, France, Spain all have alligator records in the fossil record. No caimans. I will say caimans actually also start, so caimans are sister to alligator. Caimans were in North America. Most of these things are stem caimans as well. And in fact, we have them in Texas, we have them in Colorado, we have them in Mexico. Never once has a caiman been found in Florida. It's kind of a weird mystery because they go south very quickly. They spread all across the south. They should have spread as much as alligators did. But for some reason, alligators, even though they're sister to caimans, really like North America. They never leave. They go once to Cheyenne and that's it. So we are an alligator, we're not a caiman land. Caimans do disappear in the Eocene and they would never come back. So if we look at sites though that have alligators, there are 37 sites in our database right now that have alligator fossils, ranging from teeth, osteoderms, to gorgeous, gorgeous skulls. We have the best record of archosaurs, we have the best record of crocodilians in the, well, I argue in the world, people have argued against me with this, but they've never demonstrated how that's true. By my count, this is the best crocodilian record in the world. In our 37 sites, again, only 3 have been published on. 37 sites in the state that produce alligator fossils. These are those 3 studies. And I'll indicate here that 3 studies, 3 species, right? Alligator olsoni. This was alligator mephidae. Somebody came back and synonymized it. I disagree with them, and I'll show why in a second here. And then alligator halensis. So it's funny, And you mentioned, Joe, thanks for setting that up perfectly, which is everyone loves to say alligators haven't changed very much, except there's only 3 studies, and all 3 studies show they do change. So it's a preconceived notion that's pretty much mammalian driven. It's all the mammal people who keep saying that. But as soon as you do peel the curtain back a little bit, you start to see that alligators in fact do change. They change quite a bit. Here's why I introduced our study. This is what we did. Rachel mentioned Montbrook, so I hope you're all aware. Is anyone here not aware of Montbrook? Never heard of Montbrook. Montbrook is now our focus. It is the site we've been digging now for the last decade. It is rapidly becoming our largest site, and in fact, by Richard's count, if we took everything that we've collected and cataloged it, it would be the largest collection in the state's history. The largest number of fossils would be from Montbrook, no longer Thomas Farm, which is crazy, because we've been digging for Thomas Farm for 100 plus years. We've been digging Montbrook for 10. That tells you just how dense it is. But at Montbrook, we have a lot of alligators, a lot of alligator fossils. By my record, it is the largest pre-Pleistocene fossil alligator site in the world, at Montbrook, singularly. It's a site that's about 5.5 to 5 million years. We actually recently had strontium dates come back that say about 5.67, so 5.67 million years. We actually have a very specific age for the site. So 5.67, right at the end of the Miocene. So we have this large collection. No one ever described it. Three previous papers looked at alligators, found something different every single time. So we decided, let's ask the question, if we look at the largest fossil collection of the world, will we learn something new? So again, at the Florida Museum, we like to CT scan fossils, so immediately CT scanned it. We also did this thing called surface scanning, which is where you take 1 billion photographs and you put them all together and it makes a nice, gorgeous 3-dimensional image. So we have CT images, we have these gorgeous 3D images of all these skulls. And here we are, this is kind of a post-COVID thing, but we're still online, we're trying to study these skulls. That's the one good thing about CT scanning is you can do it remotely. Anywhere around the world, we can share these images, share these fossils. That's the great value to these tool sets. And we looked at these skulls. Lots of skulls. Again, Montbrook is the largest collection of fossil alligators in the world. We looked at Thompsoni, we looked at caimans, we looked at modern alligators, we looked at other caimans, we looked at gharials, we looked at big saltwater crocodiles, and we looked at hailensis. We took all known genera and species of modern alligators and all known Florida fossil alligators, and we scanned them and surface scanned them. Everything to the left of the red line is from Montbrook, everything else is from somewhere else. We wanted to compare to the Montbrook site. We also specifically were really interested in comparing it to the racetrack site, that other study I mentioned. Initially, this was diagnosed as Mephrodite, a different species, synonymized with Mississippiensis, but it's very similar in age. It's about 1 million years older than Montbrook, and they're actually, as it turns out, only about 20 miles separated as the crow flies. They're very close sites, geographically and temporally. So again, we looked at these 2 sites, racetrack, Montbrook, 7.6, 5.5, both have an alligator site, both have gorgeous skulls. It was called Mississippiensis, but we wanted to challenge that notion. We did think it was something different. And what does the CT scanning reveal? You're gonna have to bear with me here for a second. When we take a CT scan, we just get a series of images. We get cross sections into those scans. This is what the skull looks like in 3 dimensions. If we take a single slice just through the nose, we get this image here. So in the top right corner, we're looking at a single cross section through the nose. Those 2 openings, those are the nares. Those are the openings for the nose. That's how it breathes. That bar right in the center is the bar that separates the nose. Only alligators have that bar. Crocodiles, caimans don't have that bar. That's the one way you can diagnose an alligator consistently, is the presence of that bar, that bony bar. However, every pseudoseuchian in the dawn of life, pseudoseuchians are crocodiles and alligators, excuse me, very fancy again. Every single crocodile and alligator in all of history has nothing underneath that bar. There is not a single bone. That opening is wide open, except this one. For the first time in the history of a crocodile or alligator, we found a bone that doesn't exist in any other crocodilian skull in the world. Across 65 million years of evolution and hundreds of species, this was the first one to have this bone. No one ever looked for it because it never existed. In fact, it took me 6 months to figure out what the bone even was. There's no such thing as a new bone. It took me 6 months to realize that was a vomer, a tiny little bone that's in the inside of our orbit today. But they had a massive bony vomer. Today it's entirely cartilaginous. And what other thing had it? Lo and behold, the racetrack skull had it. Both of these things have a completely new bone. Whenever you have a new bone, that's what we call apomorphy. That's a fancy word for saying something that defines a clade. It defines a species. When you have an apomorphy that nothing else in the history of Earth has, it's a really good apomorphy. So therefore, our conclusion, our little initial preliminary conclusion here, is that both Montbrook and racetrack are new species. There are 6 species. The 6 species of alligator ever recovered. I'm going to give you a little insight here where actually we've already chosen the name, Alligator pugnatus. Pugnatus is Latin for fierce or fighting, as in pugnacious. And it's in reference to the retro gator, right? The fierce fighting retro alligator. We are the University of Florida, we are the Gators. We did want to pay homage to that. So the Montbrook and racetrack alligators will be synonymized in a single new species, not Mississippiensis. It will in fact be pugnatus. So 4 fossil sites with alligators studied, 4 new species of alligator. Does that probably mean that's all of them? No, obviously not. There's probably a lot more. So, sorry Richard, there is a lot. Now, we didn't stop there though. So that's describing the external morphology. We want to take it one step further. We wanted to actually look at the anatomy. We wanted to look at the ecology of this animal. We do that using what's called isotopic mass spectrometry, where we actually look at the chemistry. You are what you eat. Your chemistry, your physical chemistry, is a product of what you eat. If you eat mostly marine things, you end up on a carbon curve in this space, above -6. If you're eating mostly freshwater things, you're behind that. You're in the -7 to -12 range. A previous study actually has found that anytime Thegachampsa and alligators coexisted, they actually did what's called partitioning. They partitioned. All Thegachampsids eat marine animals, all alligators eat freshwater. The thing is though, this study only looked at sites where alligators cohabitate with Thegachampsa. So we want to ask the question, what happens when Thegachampsa goes extinct? At 6 million years, what happens? So we looked at sites after Thegachampsa extinction. We looked at all of these sites post then. We took this fancy mass spectrometer. It's actually just a magnet, that's all it is. It takes magnets and just separates them based on weight. And we measured all of these sites, and I'll race to the end here. All of these things to the left of this line are alligator populations that are freshwater, predominantly freshwater, sites that we expected. We had 2 sites post-Thegachampsa extinction, and voila, we have the occurrence. The first ever bone valley, and ignore the hollow or not, it doesn't matter. Moss Acres, that racetrack site, that site that I told you was previously identified as Mississippiensis. These are the first 2 occurrences ever of a marine predominant alligator ever described, ever documented. And it occurs on one of the species was named Mississippiensis, which means, and I'll point out we have one outlier from the population that was during Thegachampsa. We got a little too eager. We actually sampled the Thegachampsa tooth on accident, went back and realized that wasn't alligator tooth. So that one outlier, you'll have to excuse us. What this means is that back in time, as soon as Thegachampsa goes extinct, alligators said, hey, a new buffet. They went out and they went into the ocean. For a small period of time, there were 2 populations that at least were eating marine prey more so than anything else. They took advantage of that small window. They were eager. They very quickly contracted. We don't know why, but today alligators are predominantly freshwater still. All right, with that, I see I'm way over time. Thank you. I'm going to open this to questions if I have time. Otherwise, you've been a great audience.
Yeah, so the first one, and you probably said it, I just sort of spaced. What was, when you were talking about, what is Gabby?
Gabby is the Great American Biotic Interchange. It's the time when the Isthmus of Panama, so before that, Panama was underwater. When Panama comes to the surface, it makes a bridge between South America and North America, and it allows animals to exchange. That's how we get to Northrons. All of our sloths and anemones are coming from down south. A lot of our animals end up going down, all of our animals end up going down south.
So there's a pre and post Gabby, is that what you mean?
Yeah, pre is just before that bridge exists,
Yeah.
post is after that bridge
Okay.
exists. But that doesn't exist until 3.5 million years ago, which means that bridge didn't exist when that snake crossed. So it crossed before the bridge ever existed. It did so about 12 million years before that bridge ever
But
existed.
snakes are great swimmers.
That's just it, they're great swimmers. The weird thing is that sloths, like I said, sloths also crossed beforehand, so Thinobadacides, they actually crossed before them, so apparently they were great swimmers too. In fact, sloths also get into the Caribbean, so apparently they're really good swimmers. Monkeys, that one single monkey crossed. So things that you don't necessarily think are great swimmers tend to be. Simultaneously, crocodiles and alligators don't cross very easily though, right? They don't cross before that period of time. So something about that snake made it really good at crossing that gap. Yeah.
So something about what you said about that one alligator being the first recorded alligator ever. Wouldn't something like Deinosuchus be an alligator or a crocodile?
Deinosuchus, he's a stemmed crocodile. So there are several things that look like crocodiles, including phytosaurs, Deinosuchids. Those are kind of on the rise to alligators, but they're not within the true master group alligator. It's a very technical jargon thing, but he's giving rise to, he's an early ancestor to Olympics as the classic crown condition. That's a good question, that's a great question.
Now, is that a cast or a real one?
This is a cast, yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank you all so much.
Go through show and tell. I will warn you that Rachel Narducci is here. So be careful while you show. Bring up Dr. Bob first, who does not need a microphone.
Yeah, I usually go near the end, but I haven't been doing much collecting, so I only got a few small items. The first one is a fairly nice little crown of a mastodon tooth, and I found this. I haven't been out diving since June because the river up in Steenhatchee's been high, and now it's gone. But that's a little story. Anyway, had a little dinger out of it, and Joe Brannon restored that for me and did it. So if you want to look at it, you can see how good his work is, which is why I'm showing you this one today. And you can't even tell where he did a little dinger, where he restored it. And I also brought this because from that same dive on Steenhatchee, I found this is a cannon bone, which is kind of a metapodial in here, and horses have a single toe. And they look like this, and most of the ones you've seen are like this, but they all have splints because that's vestigial from when they were three-toed horses, but the splints are supposed to be separate. This one had some major arthritis, and the splints are actually fused to the cannon bone. So if you haven't ever seen bones with arthritis, fossil ones, this is come up and take a peek at it, and it's kind of cool because it's got both splints are fused to it. So that's it for me.
Thank you. Eileen?
Okay, so many of you may know that I have been diving a lot this summer, and I was asked last meeting to bring some of my finds to show. Where do I start? I guess I'll start with a couple of verts. It's not too exciting, but I found them on my last dive, so I brought them in.
Verts of what?
I think it's whale,
Okay.
but somebody can correct me. And then a couple, maybe 3 weeks ago now, I found my first, like, almost complete mammoth tooth.
Nice.
So I was super excited about that. This is the cleaner side, and then this is the I'm full of like coral and all sorts of stuff side. I think I'm gonna keep it that way because I think that's kind of neat. And then sometimes when you find something that you're like, I've never found one of those before, you keep finding them. So on the 2nd, which is what, is that Wednesday, Tuesday, whatever day the 2nd was, I found another mammoth tooth part. So I found this guy, and then I found this guy on the same dive. Nice little square chunk. It was just sitting there. So clearly Helene just kind of picked it up and plopped it down. And then there were a few more pieces of just some mammoth stuff. And then on one of my dives earlier this summer, I found this either llama or camel toe bone. Somebody can confirm later for me which one it might be, but that's what I was told it is. And then of course, you know, the shark teeth. This is my current personal best. I found this one, I don't remember. I've been diving so much, they're all blending together. But I'm still working on cleaning it up. It's been a pain in the butt. It was completely covered in coralline algae, so this is a lot better than what it was. And then on the same dive, I found this one. The funny story about this one also was completely covered in coralline algae. I didn't even see it. I just placed my hand down, I felt something, and when I pulled it up, it was a tooth. And I was like, did I just perform a magic trick? Like, how did I do that? Can I do that again? So you never know. Like, I wasn't expecting that. It's turning out to be a really pretty tooth. It has a nice blue blade, and there's a little bit of brown in the root, so I love colors. And then I found my largest Hystalis tooth so far out of Venice. I didn't actually measure it, I just know it's the largest one because it's the biggest one I have. But I would say it's probably about 2.5 inches or so. And then I have 2 miscellaneous items that I'm not really sure what they are yet, so I'll have somebody look at them later. I was thinking it was like maybe sperm whale tooth part, but not really sure yet. So at some point maybe somebody can take a look at it and let me know. But I'll leave these up here in case anybody wants to look at that stuff later. Go diving.
Did I miss anybody? Because you're going to want to go before Joe. Come on up. I'm sorry.
Hi guys, so this is actually my second club meeting ever, and I went fossil hunting once last spring, and it was after Fossil Fest of last year. I got really inspired after doing a school project about the fossil hunting community here in Tampa. And my friend Connor Barnes went and took me out to Peace River to do baby's first little fossil hunt. And I found myself a juvenile meg, which is definitely something that I was very excited to do for one of my first times hunting. And then a pretty good condition hemi-priestess that, I think that is what it is at least. He's identified everything I pulled out of that river, but just thought I would show these off and be a part of the community some more. But, thank you.
Very cool. Anybody else I might have missed?
Before Joe.
So, I didn't find any of this. Actually, I have to thank the Fossil Club and Joe for this. So over the years, I've just between the raffles and winning door prizes, stuff like that, I've just collectively gathered different bones to an equus leg, and I've been able to finally put together Frankenstein together a whole leg. Hold on, I gotta remember where all the pieces go. Let me get the hoof. I had to pay Joe for the hoof, but give me a second. I'm gonna unravel it. There we go. See, can't hold it up because it's not all together, but you get the idea. So
That's pretty cool.
I'll leave it up here.
Anybody else? We'll go before the meeting starts. All right, Joe.
Well, I found a lot of stuff over summer, but I brought in a few things that are a couple years old because we have a alligator speaker. This is from Dr. Bob and I's site on Steenhatchee that we found together. It was the only thing that the Florida Museum, Dr. Hilbert wasn't all that interested in because apparently there's not a lot of variation in alligators for the past few million years, but maybe that's wrong. Maybe you guys want it now.
He's a mammal person, as you know.
So I guess I could kiss that stuff goodbye. And some other interesting things, I started going up to Georgia, so outside of y'all's jurisdiction, and found my friend and I stumbled on an interesting Miocene terrestrial site. Most people go up there for the big shark teeth. We didn't really find any huge ones of those, but I got some cool three-toed horse teeth, chunks of rhino, chunks of gomphothecus, and my favorite stuff were back in June. The first time I went, I got a little Borophagus. It's a bone-crushing dog from the Miocene jaw section.
Cool.
And then this past 2 weeks ago, I found a canine in the same spot. So there's a decent amount of Miocene terrestrial carnivore there, which is pretty interesting. But the more impressive thing, I've been diving a spot on the Withlacoochee River for a couple years now, and back in September, I found that tooth and brought it in. And then this past month, I went back to the same spot now that the river's kind of flooded. And I got its twin, and they actually fit in the whole jaw, which is pretty cool. So the right side came out in December, and the left side came out last week. And I had to putty and fill them through the middle. I didn't paint it or anything. But it's missing the M2s, these two 3-hump teeth. So I'll have to probably keep going back there for another 2 years to get those. And I just have the teeth kind of wedged in here with some quake hold putty. But yeah, that's probably one of my favorite fossils just because it's a whole elephant jaw. I have one broken. They have these cool lower tusks, and it has the sockets for them, just like it has the sockets for these front two teeth, but they haven't turned up. They're they're probably shattered. But hopefully in another year I'll bring this back with the front two teeth.
Joe, can you tell how old it is by the wear pattern? How old was the animal when it died? About?
It's a full adult because these are all, they have 6 teeth on each side throughout their life, something like that, right? And these are the last adult teeth.
Okay.
So they would have had, eventually these would have worn down and been spit out, and then by the time this wears completely down, the animal is at the end of its life.
Okay.
So something probably killed this thing, or something happened and it died in its prime maybe, because these are its last 2 teeth that it gets.
Okay. Thank you.
Lawrence and Katora Cotton, you ready? Yeah. They have a short presentation they'd like to give.
Now, how many of you were around during the end of year banquet in June when I told that story? There were quite a few of you. Well, this is like a follow-up to that. But to recap, Francis Butland was a man who didn't think too much of animals and saw humans as superior. When the finding was New Zealand Natural History, where he and I worked, got a new interactive platform installed, which allowed guests to speak to the exhibits and ask questions, he was not all for the idea. One night on the night shift, he has a conversation with a Colombian mammoth skeleton who tells him that humans are just animals like every other living thing and that they too could go extinct. Well, Francis was unnerved by this whole exchange, but he was willing to write it off as the interactive platform acting up. That was until he was told that the platform had been shut off after the guests had left. And that left him really, really unnerved. A couple of months had passed since that event, and Francis was a different person. He was much more quieter and less often to voice his own opinions on things. Cole and Ross, the other 2 people we worked with, didn't pay much mind, but I did. They had never believed him when he said that the mammoth skeleton talked to him, but I figured that there was something more going on, and I knew it too. Francis! Oh, hey Larry, are you doing all right? Yeah, I'm fine, I guess. Is this about what happened all those months ago? Francis, you can't take what that platform said seriously. You know it wasn't the platform, Larry. You said it yourself, it was turned off. Something's wrong with this museum, I just know it. I think this place is possessed. Well, the world is a strange place and there are lots of things we don't understand, but I don't know what to tell you. Larry? Yeah? I'm sorry. What for? For saying that you making friends with animals was a waste of time and all that? I was a real jerk. Yeah, you were. But I can see that you do mean what you say. And I'm willing to put it all behind us. Handshake. Yeah. Thanks. Well, we better get inside. Don't want the boss getting on our case. Hey, Frankie. Sorry, Francis. It's fine. It doesn't bother me anymore. Hey, Larry, do you think after work you can introduce me to some of the animals you know? Sure, I could do that. Everything calmed down after that for a while, until one Friday. All right, you four, listen up. I got news. This afternoon, a middle school group of kids is coming over to spend the night here in the museum. What? What's wrong with kids? What's wrong with kids? You really want to know? We spend all our time keeping this place organized. The last thing we need is a bunch of children running around, touching things, moving things out of place. Oh, come on, Cole, it can't be that bad. You weren't here the last few times, right? Right. Last time we had a bunch of elementary and kindergarten kids in here. They were all over the place. I think I even saw one of them hanging off the brontosaurus neck once. These are middle schoolers. They'll hopefully be older and more mature than that. Hopefully. Well, anyway, I need all four of you to keep an eye on things. Make sure none of them steps out of line. Understand? Yes, sir. Late afternoon rolled around, and 2 buses full of middle school kids rolled up. Some of them had cameras, eager to take pictures of all of them, all of what they could see in the museum. Now, most of them were excited to be there, but of course, there's always some kids who are there to ruin the fun for everyone. I don't see why I have to be here. Just because my dad says it'll get me out more. Come on, Roy, it'll be fun. We're gonna spend the night surrounded by dinosaurs and mammoths. What can be cooler than that? Oh yeah, a night surrounded by dead things. That sounds cool and fun. Might as well camp out in a cemetery. Well, I think it'll be fun. Yeah, you would, Joseph. Come on. Everyone single file over. Oh, yeah. Well, we have a good crowd here, huh? Now listen, I know all of you are excited to be here. That's debatable. And I know you're all gonna have a good time exploring this museum. You can take as many pictures as you want, and you're free to explore every part of the museum you like. But there are some rules. There's always a catch. Rule number 1, no touching anything unless the sign says it's okay for you to touch it. Rule number 2, if a sign says stay out of a certain area, you stay out. Rule number 3, no filtering from the gift shop or cafeteria. And rule number 4, this is important. Stay out of the basement. Why? What's in the basement? Monsters. No. What we have down there are specimens that are there for study, and as well as skeletons we haven't put out on display yet. We don't want anyone going down there and disturbing them. Huh? What he means is that we don't want a bunch of noisy, filthy kids going down there, touching things and moving them around and potentially breaking them. Just stay out of the basement. Understood? Understood. Good. Now enjoy your time learning about extinct life. You kids just watch yourself around here. Strange things happen in this museum. Strange things. Hey, what do you think that guy meant by strange things happen in this museum? Maybe the museum's haunted or something. Haunted museums. Please. Roy gets an idea, trying to make the trip more fun, for himself at least. 8 p.m. Whoa, there's so many things to see here. I'll be lucky to get He rounds the corner when boom! Someone wearing a dinosaur mask scares him. Or, are you quite done, Roy? How'd you know it was me? Only you would pull off a stupid prank like that. I'm here to enjoy myself, as well as everyone else. We don't have time for your stupid little pranks right now. Now, if you'll excuse me, I got more pictures to take. Stupid Joseph. Gonna have to find some other way to liven this trip up. Roy wandered away from the group he was in, further and further into the museum. Presently, he came to a hallway where he saw an elevator. Curious, he walks up and presses the button to open it and steps inside. He looks at the buttons, noting all the floors. Then he sees the button that takes you to the basement. Ding! Going down, 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 down into the basement he goes. Now this elevator is one of those types that have doors on either side. You enter one way and exit the other. So when he gets to the basement, the doors on the other side open. He steps out. There are rows upon rows of cabinets and shelves with various fossil pieces in them. He walks among them, occasionally opening some to get a better look. Then he comes to a large section of room where there are full mounted skeletons on display. Some small mammals, others giant dinosaurs. This must be what they were hiding down here. This basement isn't too scary. I wonder if... Weren't you? He gasped. There in front of him, on a flat cart, is the skeleton of a cat of some kind. A very, very big cat. A North American lion. Just a skeleton. Imagine being scared by. Say, that's a good trick. He grabs the flat cart with the lion skeleton on it and pushes it towards the elevator. A devious plan in his mind. He pushes it in the elevator and presses it for the main floor. Going up. Wait till all those guys see this. They'll be screaming and wetting their pants. You can probably guess what he was planning to do with that skeleton, don't you? He was gonna scare all his classmates by making it think it was alive. When it gets to the main floor, he pulls it out and pushes it towards where he knew his classmates were. Wait till they get a load of this coming towards them. I bet they won't even have a straight face. Now, Roy's idea of scaring his classmates would have been a clever prank, but unfortunately, bringing the skeleton up was the only part of that trick which worked. He hadn't noticed that his shoelace was untied, and as he got closer to where his classmates were in the fossil hall, he tripped, landing face flat on the floor, but the flat cart with the skeleton kept on rolling. It rolled down the hallway into the fossil hall, past his classmates. Roy looked up just in time to see the roll into the hall and hit the back wall with a loud bang! All the kids turned and looked at Roy and said, say it with me, ooh, Roy Donalds! Uh-oh. What is the teacher. You see, what is going on here? Me and the other museum workers come over. What is all that noise? Roy brought up a skeleton from the basement. You went down into the basement after we said not to? Oh boy. I go to check to see if the skeleton's all right. It doesn't look too damaged. Oh, so once you were the one who brought it up here, you're gonna be the one to take it back down. But by myself? Yes, by yourself. You had no issue going down the basement by yourself and getting it up here so you can take it back down by yourself. You kids, days. I ought to stump and mount you for that little stunt you pulled. Okay, that is taking it a bit too. The other students start chuckling. The manager turned to them. As for the rest of you, get ready for bed. But what thought we could stay up late? Not anymore. You lost that privilege when your little bunny ear decided to break the rules. The other students weren't laughing anymore. They glared at Roy. They all stared and growled at him as they left to get ready to go to sleep. And you listen to me, young man, the manager says, turning back to him. Unless you straighten up your act, you're going to be sleeping down in the basement with it and all the other old bones. Got it? Yes, sir, said Roy. The manager turned and left. Oh, boy, I said to myself, that kid's really in for it now. And I didn't just mean trouble with the adults. Roy slowly walks to where the lion skeleton sat on the flat cart. It wasn't damaged. Huh? Disturbed. Oh, very funny, you guys. I'm so scared. There's no one there. It's just him and the lion. He carefully grabs the flat cart and rolls it back to the elevator, pressing the button to go down. Slumber. Roy is uneasy. He gets back down to the basement and pushes the flat cart with the lion skeleton back to the room where he originally found it. The lights suddenly begin to flicker on and off, eerily. Roy then notices something. What are those strange lights in the skeletons? The lights then cut off completely. And then Roy realizes what he's seeing. The lights in the skeleton are in the skull. And where in the skull they're placed is where the eyes of the animals would be. Then, in the dark, he hears the cracking and creaking of bones. Bones that haven't been moved in years. The skulls had all turned to face him. Then he looks back at the lion and, you dare disturb my slumber! Roy jumps. Ah! Instead of a skeleton, there is a full-blooded American lion standing in front of him. He screams and runs right back to the elevator, the lion chasing after him, roaring all the while. He presses the button to the elevator, and they're trying to get it to open. The lion almost there. Finally, the door opens. He gets inside, and he presses the button to get it to go up. The door closes just as the lion reaches out with its claws and slashes it. The elevator goes up, 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 back to the main floor of the museum, leaving the lion and all the ghostly animals behind. Roy catches his breath. That just happened. He exits the elevator on the main floor. There you are! What was taking you so long? I put the skeleton back. Please don't let me sleep in the basement. I'll be good. Okay, just get ready for bed. Yes, I'll do that right now. See that? Results. Roy got ready for bed, all the while looking behind him to make sure he wasn't being followed or hunted by anything. He unfurled his sleeping bag when I walked by. Strange things happen in this museum. Oh yeah, very strange things. I turned off the light and walked away. Roy got into his sleeping bag along next to his classmates. That didn't happen. It was just my imagination. I bet those museum people did it. It was all fancy animatronics and such. Yeah, it's the last time I let people like that get the better of me. Yeah, it wasn't real. Roy uneasily fell asleep, content in his mind that what he experienced was just that, in his mind. Or was it those silhouettes of animal skeletons in the dark with glowing eyes surrounding the school group? The next morning, Roy wasn't in his sleeping bag. We searched everywhere. We found him. He was on one of the school buses, shivering in the back seat. The students finished up their trip by noon and left for home. Me and Francis were talking about it later. Whatever scared that kid last night really scared him good. Going on about a lion and such, attacking him in the basement. Yeah, it's strange, all right. Huh. Well, we better go down there and make sure that everything's all right. Anyway, yeah, we should. We enter the elevator and go down to the basement. Everything is just as it is. All the cabinets are closed. All the skulls are in the proper position, and the lion skeleton is still where it is. But then when we come back to the elevator, Francis notices something. Hey Larry, look at this. There on the elevator door are large, distinctive claw marks from a big cat. Francis's night with the mammoth comes back to him. Where's the mammoth skeleton talking? Now this, what is this? Francis, I say, putting a hand on his shoulder, I think it's time you knew the truth. The end. I was inspired to do this by several things. One, me and my sister went to San Diego this summer, where we happened to visit the zoo, and we saw the lions there. And in that section, they had several statues of Ice Age animals there, comparing them to the living ones. And if you thought that modern lions are big, well, can you imagine seeing an Ice Age lion that's 25% larger than an African one? And imagine that coming after you. Another thing that inspired us is that some of you may know that we went to the Field Museum in Chicago once. And there they have 3 stuffed specimens of man-eating lions that attacked people in Africa during the 19th and 20th centuries. And it just makes me wonder, would American lions really have attacked and gone after humans during the Ice Age? Well, what do you think? Have American lions even been found in the state? Yes, I think so. Yeah. Well, one thing's for certain, that lion wasn't sleeping tonight, and he was making sure no one else would either. So I just hope that this story leaves you with some things. Always respect animals and nature. And whenever you're in a zoo, aquarium, or even a natural history museum, don't be surprised if those animals, dead or alive, are watching you and judging you.
Like